Well, I think you have a very new spirit when it comes to energy and related environment issues in the Obama administration. At the EPA, you've got Lisa Jackson very much committed to energetic enforcement of the laws, and I think this is going to really help companies focus on the need to be more energy efficient, among other things. We're starting to see regulations on greenhouse gases in the absence of congressional action. Again, that's going to put a focus and a premium on efficient use of energy across the economy. And I think in the person of Stephen Chu at the Energy Department, you've got a whole commitment to a new energy approach to the economy, really emphasizing wind power, solar power, a smart grid, and all of the things needed to move us away from the fossil fuel past. And of course, at the very top, you've got President Obama, who is deeply committed to an alternative energy future, to a new energy future. And he has a series of reasons for this. Climate change is getting a lot of attention, but he's committed to it above and beyond that. I think President Obama cares a lot about getting off fossil fuels, in part to reduce local air pollution. He's very concerned about the particulates and other emissions that arise whenever coal is burned and frankly, when other fossil fuels are burned. Second of all, he's got a very clear signal to the administration that we need to think about how to get out from under the Middle East as a foreign policy burden. And I think as long as energy supply lines run through the Middle East, there's a very difficult time getting out from under that as a fundamental strategy element of the United States foreign policy and perhaps a burden. And frankly, if you're still committed to fossil fuels, even if you were to get out of the Middle East, you're going to be stuck dealing with countries like Russia and Kazakhstan and Nigeria and Venezuela, almost a laundry list of countries you don't want your lifeblood of the economy running through. And I think beyond the geostrategic element, President Obama very much believes in a potential green jobs future by investing in alternative energy and by investing in energy efficiency, ranging from high-end jobs for engineers and people designing these new kinds of energy supply, but also at much lower levels, putting in insulation, helping people to become more energy efficient in their homes, their offices, their factories, and their commercial buildings. So I think there is a very broad base of commitment from top to bottom in this administration to an energy future that's quite different from the past. The public, of course, has two major roles in energy policy. One is the participation as citizens in elections, and I think you see a growing number of elected officials concerned about the environment, concerned about related energy issues, and obviously they voted for a president who's made this a top agenda item. But the public has also got a second role as consumers, and I think you see them increasingly exercising their consumer sovereignty to drive for greener products across the spectrum, from household cleaning issues to a real push for greater energy efficiency in the goods and services they provide. The Cash for Clunkers program earlier this year is a great example of that, where the public really took to the idea of having more efficient cars. And I think you're going to see the Obama administration roll out other clunker-like programs for more energy efficient appliances, more energy efficient buildings, more energy efficient houses, and it's really going to be, I think, a real hallmark of this administration over the next couple of years. I think we're seeing changes in how policy shapes the private sector's approach to energy issues. I think the approach last year in Washington was very much around a crazy limited energy strategy focused on corn-based ethanol as an alternative to fossil fuels. Well, anyone who looks seriously at this agenda knows that corn-based ethanol at best can be a side issue, a small contribution to a new platform of fuels. But I think what you've got now is a real commitment to put a price signal in the marketplace on carbon dioxide emissions. And once people have to pay for the harm they're causing, I think you're going to see a lot of effort put into efficiency in order to spend less on energy and not have to pay those fees, and then into alternative energy, which breaks free altogether of greenhouse gas emissions. And frankly, the fossil fuel world is going to have to invest in carbon capture and storage to figure out whether they can be part of the energy future, because they've figured out how not to cause greenhouse gas emissions that lead to global warming and so many other problems. You've seen investment ramping up until the collapse in the economy in 2008, and there was a steep decline as almost no investment was going anywhere. But it's bounced back quite strongly in 2009, and I think you're going to see 2010 be even bigger in terms of investment in a whole sweep of energy future options: wind power, solar power, second generation biofuels, some more exotic things like wave power and tidal power. And then I think you're even getting people starting to invest quite heavily in extracting fuel from algae and a variety of possibilities like that. And of course, again, energy efficiency investments of all sorts and investments in the enabling technologies for a smarter grid, for storage of electricity, for batteries. So I think you see quite a wide array of activities being undertaken with investments being put in the hope that we're going to move to a much different energy base for our society. He's proposed a renewable portfolio standard that would require this ramp up in the percent of electricity generated from non-fossil fuel sources over the next decade. And I think it would be quite a dramatic signal from the regulatory structure to the utilities in particular that they've got to think differently about how they're going to generate power going forward. It's an ambitious goal. I think President Obama is eager to really drive the technology race and have people really think hard about these opportunities. And in fact, I think that's just the right strategy. One of the things we've learned from the past is the government is not good at picking winners, but setting an overall performance standard that says we don't know what the right answer is, whether it's wind or solar or biofuels, but what we do know is that we need to get off fossil fuels, get off the emissions of carbon dioxide coming from those traditional fuels. And we're going to really put an incentive in the marketplace to try out a wide variety of options and see who can bring down their cost curves and become the energy supply of preference over the coming decade or two. Well, I think what you see is that there is a deep intersection between our foreign policy agenda and our energy policy agenda. And frankly, we can't solve our international challenges without getting an energy policy that makes sense. We aren't going to get an energy policy that makes sense unless we factor in those foreign policy issues. So these are not just running in parallel, they're deeply intertwined. And of course, that's also true of the climate change issue. We are not going to be able to get a good, sound climate change policy in place in the United States unless we are also seeing action on the international front with particularly our major trade partners, China and India, stepping up to play a role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the signal that they're serious will make it easier for our Congress to take action. So these things are deeply intertwined. The domestic policy conversation around energy, the legislation around climate change, and the foreign policy issues that are related, particularly the negotiations that are in climate change focus for 2009 at Copenhagen and then beyond in 2010. Well, I think the challenge is that President Obama has proven himself to be a very extraordinary leader and manager, and he's got a small tier of priorities that he spends a lot of time on: the economy, national security, and right now, healthcare. And until one of those three issues really calms down, there's not much space for energy policy or climate change policy beyond that. So I think we have to hope that there is a healthcare bill accomplished in 2009, and this allows us in 2010 to move into a new agenda around energy and climate change. And I do think the president is committed to that as a priority, but he does have healthcare first on the docket.